Hi everyone, welcome to this webinar, MBDH webinar on the data science student groups. My name is Alice Delage and I am community liaison for the MBDH. We run our webinars the last Wednesday of the month, 5:30 to 6:30 p.m. Central Time, and we usually invite data science student groups to talk about their structure and their work. And we thought tonight that we would have a little bit of a special session and invite actually a mentor who can talk more about how to help build data science capacity among students, and that maybe that would provide an interesting addition to our usual webinars. So Elizabeth Wickes, thank you and welcome. I'm gonna introduce you real quick, and oops. Oh. All right. So Elizabeth is a lecturer at the School of Information Science at the University of Illinois, where you teach programming, data curation, and information technology courses. Elizabeth was previously a data curation specialist for the Research Data Service at the University Library of the University of Illinois, and the Curation Manager for Wolfram Alpha. She currently co-organizes the Champaign-Urbana Python user group, and has been a Carpentries instructor since 2015, a trainer since 2017, and an elected member of the Carpentries Executive Council since 2018. So Elizabeth, thank you so much for joining us tonight, and we are looking forward to hearing you, and feel free to take it from here.
Great, thanks so much. Let me do the buttons that I was able to do successfully a few minutes ago here and get my slides going. Cool. So you should see my slide okay, I hope?
I do.
Excellent.
We all do.
So this is super exciting because data science is such a hard space to be in. It's hard on students, it's hard on mentors because it's such a thorny, complicated, new, awesome thing that we're all very excited about, but so very confused by constantly. But we have love of that confusion, I feel. So as you mentioned, I'm a lecturer at the School of Information Sciences. That makes me teaching faculty. So I'm full-time teaching faculty. I teach a couple courses, and I'm going to talk about it in a second. And I like to think about this is sort of how I teach super formally, less formally, and somewhat formally. My research interests are in technical education for research programming, roughly. Informal learning, computer science, teaching methods, programming stuff. Something a bullet point got nixed off there somehow. Roughly at the intersection of data science education and reproducibility, right? Because we can say reproducibility is a jam and awesome stuff we should do, but it's an incomplete, so any software solution that comes up for reproducibility is incomplete if you don't have people who can use it, right? The Jupyter notebooks are beautiful for reproducibility, but if you don't have the skills or experience to utilize all of those features in an appropriate way, it's no longer a useful tool for reproducibility. So the software doesn't solve the problem. The humans solve the problem via the software. And that perspective will hopefully be a lens you'll see in all of this presentation. So I teach the most formally with two different classes. So IS 452, roughly speaking, it's an introduction to programming for data processing tasks. Its actual title is Foundations of Information Processing. So we talk about reading in data, searching data, transforming data, things like that. Presume you have no programming experience before. So I take you from zero to parsing JSON and doing really cool things. Open Data Mashups is a more advanced class that is entirely project-based, and you actually have to grab data openly grab data and smash it all together to make a new, totally novel data set, preparation for analysis. So So those are the two formal contexts that I teach in. Less formally, I'm also an instructor with the Carpentries. I've taught Python, R, SQL, Git, GitHub, um, spreadsheets, OpenRefine, in a variety of different contexts as well, in all of those lessons. So those workshops, if you're not familiar, are roughly a 2-day format. Each sort of morning or afternoon is a separate module in there, and it's meant to sort of give you an idea of what it looks like what does R look like, and how might that be helpful for my research. And in about a couple hours, we can answer that as part of the workshop. Super informally, I have been facilitating a weekly Python meetup for about 6 years now. And in that time, I have seen a ton of students come in who are from a variety of different backgrounds, different levels as well. We have undergrads, grad students, we've had other faculty come in as well. And a lot of them are trying to get into data science and trying to do research programming, but are missing a formal space to learn it, or a formal space to really practice it. And so we can provide an informal space to do that. Everything in life is a useful lie, right? It's sort of how we get the job done somehow. So the name data science really is a fiction. Let me get my notes open here properly. That it's growing, it's evolving, it's still self-defining in this space. And so it's kind of a placeholder. It's a placeholder name for something that's still growing, right? It hasn't really erupted from the surface yet. And in 5 years, we're probably going to be calling it something different. And that's fine. That's a beautiful space to be in. But it's a really hard space to be in because it sort of grew up in industry a little bit and didn't have the boundaries of academic departments sort of pushing and pulling it in different ways. And so then when it's getting yanked back into academia, all of a sudden it doesn't fit anymore because we're trying to inject it back into a space that it grew up outside of. So it's got parts and elements and spirits sourced from so many different disciplines and domains. It doesn't live outside disciplines, it just really lives beyond it, above it, outside of it. It's a different type of interdisciplinary work. It belongs to no one, but yet it belongs to everyone. The definition of data science and the identity of it isn't a debate right now, it's a conversation. And we're still, if you think about it as a dinner party, we're still not done with the icebreaker games. That we're still trying to introduce ourselves to each other. We have a lot to learn. We haven't really, some departments haven't really interacted at this extent for a long time, if ever. And so we're still kind of getting a feel for each other. I think it's a beautiful space. I'm from sociology though, so where everyone is welcome and interesting, and every domain is welcome and interesting. And so to me, this is totally normal. This is a Tuesday for me. But I know a lot of people are sort of very trying to like manage their own identity inside of such an amorphous blob of a space. It's an extremely hard space to be in as a newcomer. Belonging is powerful and important. The identity that we have and the group membership that we belong to provide us a lot of different things. They're how we explain ourselves, right? Like, let me tap back here. These are my 3 labels that you can call me, right? I'm a lecturer, I'm an executive council member, I'm a co-organizer of these things. I belong to these 3 groups. Like when I just self-describe myself, I'm a very Carpentries kind of person. I found the Carpentries and I found that that community and the actions of that community fit with the approach and spirit that I take to educating and practice and my own work. And I found that group found me, and I identify with them and I explain myself by them, right? I've also got the School of Information Sciences, which I've always called the best place I've never belonged, because I've always been that sort of interdisciplinary outsider where everything is interesting. You know, I work in education research, computer science research, information science research, cognitive research, a lot of different things. Everything is on the table. And so it's hard to explain yourself when you sort of belong in a lot of different places. To me, I make sense to myself, and I have colleagues that I make sense to as well. But when you're in such a new space and you don't have those sort of traditions of group membership, it's hard because our group affiliations and group membership give us the rules that we know how to follow, that we should feel like we should be following, right? It's like, oh, this is how we do it. Okay, so think about social science and the tradition of the IRB, the sort of human subjects protection groups like that. For librarianship, it's patron privacy. That is a rule that we follow. That is an overarching rule across all of our work. They give us that. These group affiliations give us that. They also give us the pathways that we take forward. Like, what does a career path look like? I'm sure a lot of us from liberal arts and humanities have seen posters on the wall of like, what else can you do with the PhD in the humanities? Or industry positions you can do with a PhD in chemistry, things like that. Like, there's different sorts of pathways that are part of the narrative conversation of our groups. They provide us the checks and balances for our norms as well. Like, you come in, like, look at how the programming humor, right? So the humor of computer science is all about the checks and balances. If you look at how the things that they joke about that it is normal that you Google for help, that it is normal that you copy and paste code, that you should be using version control. Like, this is part of the satire and the communication of this community, and that is provided, that tradition and perspective and technique is given to you as part of that community. And so we learn the practice of our work by interacting and watching our community at work. We do it, we experience it, but these communities give us a lot. They give us our identity, they give us our skills, they give us the catalog of technique that we think is available to us. And it's hard sometimes to imagine something else that could exist when you don't know that it's ever been done before, right? So this is sort of what community gives us, and belonging to someplace gives us. But what does it mean to belong to such a new place, right? So when I was thinking about this phrase of building capacity is way more than building technical skills. It's not about learning Python. It is not about learning R. It is not about machine learning. It is about being welcomed and embraced into this new community of practitioners who will give us identity and guide us through the experience of this practice, the experience of the things that are options to us. It's really hard to see a pathway forward when there are no pathways clearly defined, because everything is on the table. And it's hard to, when we talk about the sampling universe, right? It's hard to pull a sample from something if you don't know what the sampling universe is made up of, right? It's really hard to sort of act in these ways. And so this is all informing the mentorship that we make. So if we talk about capacity, like, what does capacity really mean in this context? And we can think of it as providing acceptance to people who identify and belong in these groups, and the transmission of this identity. Again, it's not about learning how to code. It's about becoming a practitioner and skilled expert in data science. So leaders in this space, and I'm using leaders very explicitly because I want this to include both the student leaders who are leading these student groups, and also their faculty mentors, their staff mentors, anyone who's helping out these student groups, and the students themselves. So you have to mentor people's identities. People come in and they think, I think I like this. What do I do about that? Who am I? These are the things I like. Does that make sense? You have to help mentor someone through, like, where do you fit in? And so part of that conversation is like, well, are you a data science person, or maybe more of you're a data engineering kind of person? And we have to transmit those two labels, right? So be a guide to colloquialisms and labels, like what is the difference between a data analyst and a data scientist? That's an important conversation to have with the newcomer, because they've probably seen all the words. They've picked up this implication that they're somehow different, but they have a very fuzzy idea of what that means. And part of accepting and bringing people into a community and mentoring them is helping them unpack what those definitions mean and how it applies to their work. And helping people explore, like, this is a massive field, right? It's a massive domain. There's a lot of different areas and aspects of data science. There's not just the one thing that we do. There's so many things that we do. And sorry, I have to shift positions like every 10 minutes or I like lose my mind a little bit. There's so many different things that we do, yet it's got one label. And so we have to help people come in and then let this new whole world unfold around them in a way that we make them feel accepted and safe to explore and learn. We also have to, as leaders, be the connective thread between these different domains. To be able to talk about the work being done in all these different departments and research methodologies and all the different homes that data science has found, both source from and identity within. We also have to be the storyteller and speak to all of the audiences, and we have to tell the story of data science, tell the story of how it started, how it became, why did the community take up Python? Why did the community take up R? Why have the numbers for other programming languages dwindled a little bit in comparison? Why are these our canon? We have to transmit those stories to our newcomers, to our students. And we also need to be a welcoming and affirming voice of, yes, you do belong. You have to be the person, the first face that someone sees who says, I think I belong here. Do I? And you have the power to say, yes, your work has a place here and your voice is valuable and I want to hear more of it. Because acceptance is very, very powerful. And that's really how you build a community. So yeah, capacity via community. This stuff is hard to do. Learning technical stuff is hard to do. Transmitting community and explaining yourself and the definition of your life is hard to do. So, but community is a vital transmission pathway, right? We learn in so many different ways. Like, we might have forgotten, but like maybe you go to a new country that you've never been before, and you're out to dinner with colleagues, and you have to look around the table and see, like, okay, what are the table manners here in this country, right? Do you notice that if you're in the UK, they hold the knife and fork differently, how they sit in like the other countries, they sit in the chairs differently. There's different mannerisms that you can kind of pick up on and communicate. We learn through this experience through watching and listening and doing. So we learn about data science through the projects that we do, through the stories that we hear from our buddies. This could be a formal story told in a conference talk. It could be an informal story, just sort of having lunch with a friend, talking about a model that they're building or a data set that they're trying to work with or something like that. It's also you learn a lot about the values of a community as well, and sort of listening to other people critique work. You learn what are the values of my community and how does that make me appreciate and critically analyze my own work as well. And there's a lot that's being transmitted for us by way of community that we have to be a little bit intentional about, but we are community creatures. And so we will generally just kind of take care of business on our own if given a space to do so. So learning things is hard. Learning technical things is really hard, depending on where you're starting from. Again, the beautiful thing about data science is that it belongs to everyone. And yet the skill set required to perform data science does not. So as an approach, as a research method, it belongs to all of us. the technicalities are not equally transmitted. So some of us are going to start our data science pathway from knowing no computer science, knowing no programming. Some of us are going to start at knowing some statistics, but not Python. Some of us are going to start it with Python and no statistics. It really depends. And so depending on how you come into this space, your priority is always going to be strategic. You always have to be strategic about how you approach and prioritize things, particularly as a student, right? Because data science doesn't appear on a lot of subject names at this point. It's new in a lot of different places, but there's a lot of people doing it sort of outside of this sort of data science major. A little bit, it's happening. But as a student, you have a certain set of priorities to take care of. So when you're thinking about projects, they always say when you want to learn computer science or programming, oh, just do a project, right? Oh, just build a game. It's sort of like the traditional things that people are told. But those are really hard things to do if you've never done any of it before. It's hard to pick a project in a space you don't know anything about. So as you want to do more data science and you are already going to be forced to do projects and other work as part of your normal coursework, there's a certain pathway that is being given to you and constructed around you as a student, depending on which program you're in. So when you pick projects in your data science world, pick something that's going to serve multiple purposes. Maybe it's a data set you're using for one class. You think, oh, that actually would be a really good data set for a network analysis tool that I want to use. Or maybe, oh, this class is using this tool and there's this data set over here I've been really wanting to explore. So be strategic. So tick the boxes that need to get ticked. Get the job done of your coursework. Keep those short-term priorities absolutely centered in your vision of what needs to be done, because those really are your priorities. Be around other people as they're doing this work. Listen to friends. Don't take research questions necessarily off the table around these things. Always be open and listening. The Python user group that I co-organize is inside of a makerspace. And I have spent 6 years just chilling in a makerspace every Saturday, pretty much, and listening to people talk. And you can learn a lot. And the scope of what you think is possible in life expands every time you hear two pros talk and shop across the room. You might not have any idea what they're talking about, and you might only be half listening, but there are little tidbits that you're going to pick up on along the way. And that can be extremely powerful, because maybe a student comes to you, or someone else or a friend comes to you with a problem, and they're like, this thing is going on, and you think and you remember, you know what, I just saw maybe something, a tweet about that. Maybe I just saw something on Facebook about that, or maybe I just read about that in something else, right? Those little, again, the catalog of possibilities of reality that you build up just in being around information like that gives us the power, particularly in such a strongly interdisciplinary world like data science. There's a lot of problems that have been solved, but other groups are still fighting with because they're not aware of that. And so, or they haven't made the connection that the problem solved over here in A is actually really representative of the problem they're fighting with in B, and B could really use a lot of the solutions founded by group A. So there's a lot of cross-pollination that still needs to happen. So be around other people that are doing these things. Listen to them. Learn from what they're judging, from what they're valuing, from how they approach the trials and successes and errors and amazing things that they do, from the peers you're working with, from your mentors as well. Listen to their stories. Because you might hear two practitioners, one person holding up a certain idea that's amazing and one person shooting down that idea, and you as a novice have to navigate that, or you as a mentor have to help that novice navigate that. So as a novice, you're going to be thinking, okay, I need more data points here. Do I like this idea or not? I don't know. I don't have enough of a framework, theoretical framework, to know if this is a true horrible violation of privacy or something amazing that people have done. Like we've all, maybe not we've all, Netflix for a little bit was tweeting out sort of interesting outlier statistics of like, oh, there's 3 people who've watched the Bee movie every day for a month or 2 months or something like that. And they tried to make jokes out of it. And some people were like, oh, that's great. That's a really good joke. And other people were pretty horrified that they were calling out their users in that way. And as a novice, seeing that tweet and seeing that thread of judgment and adoration, how do you navigate that space? And so having a community and having a mentor that you can discuss this with and say like, I don't know what to think here. Here's what I'm seeing, you know, this is a place that we would discuss in class, right? If we had formalisms around these things, we could have these formal discussions of this judgment space, but oftentimes we lack these things because it's such a new place. And so novices need a place to go to ask these questions and to hear these conversations happening. Always watching, always listening. So you have to do data science things in a community. You have to hear about data science things. You can do this at a conference. You can do this watching talks on YouTube. But really importantly is you just need to watch other people performing data science. Listening to how they're asking questions, listening to how they're approaching problem solving. So it's not about redefining from the inside out maybe what a data structure is, but maybe you can build the logic to define what it's not and then take the complement, something like that. There's a lot of different problem solving techniques that exist out there, and just watching and listening to these approaches that other people take will help you kind of rattle through the catalog of options when you're trying to when you're facing a novel problem as well. So to sum up, so speaking to the students who are trying to work inside of this space, it's hard. And you're probably facing a lot of questions of identity and belonging and help. And so you have both technical problems of like, I just need to be able to see this data. I don't know what's going on. And also problems of community of I am siloed. I don't have other people who know what I'm talking about. I use words that they don't understand, or they look at me, or they tell me to stop talking about this research. Or I don't know who I am because I don't feel like I am my current program. I don't feel like I'm this scholar of this domain, but yet this other place that I work in doesn't have an identity either. And so what am I? Who am I? Where do I belong? And how do I get this job done? Those are all really first level problems, first class problems in this space. So as a student, be noisy. Find the people, find where they live, locally, remotely. This is nothing about this is new, but you have to be noisy about trying to find help because there's probably other people around you who are having similar problems as well. Prioritization is really deeply important. When I talk to people about prioritizing their learning, there's things you I like to use this triad here of like need, want, and watch. Needs are things that you will literally be fired for not knowing how to do. And that's an important, very clear-cut distinction of like, will you fail the class or will not get a C or a B, but fail the class because you don't know it? Will you be fired from your job for not knowing it? And those are two really important thresholds to be able to answer. So not, can I do my job? Do I need this to do my job well? Or do I need to do this to do my job at all? You know, and there's that fine-tuned precision of prioritization that really is an important question to answer. The want are the items that will boost you. They're like, okay, I've ticked the boxes that are need, right? Now I want to do better. I want to be better. I want to know this better. You know, those are wants in there. And those are high priority, but the needs should absolutely come first. The watch, though, is a special one, and I think one of the most important ones because it's the stuff you're not going to do anything about. And I will often, and I find this in myself, and I see this a lot in students as well, they're like, there's so many things I need to know how to do. I apparently need to know Hadoop and big data, but also pandas and all these statistics things, but then also how to do DevOps stuff. And it's, no, you don't. Not all at once. You kind of have to just pick one and figure it out from there. So the watch are the items where you want to keep an eye on it, but you're not actively pursuing it. So maybe there's someone on Twitter that you really like who talks about it a lot. Maybe there's someone that, or maybe there's a conference that talks about it that's local that you want to go to. This is the stuff you keep an eye on for something interesting, for interesting opportunities like training at a conference or a workshop provided once a year by your department, something like that. But you're not actively pursuing on a regular basis, like on a weekly or monthly basis. And so this allows you to say no to things, but in a way that's still satisfying, right? So with this lack of identity and belongingness creates a lot of anxiety, and being aware of that in yourself, a lot of people, it's important to acknowledge that I feel scared that I don't know enough here, and so all of a sudden I need to know everything and be constantly pursuing knowledge so I can feel like I know enough. At some point, you have to start saying no to things, and having that watch list is an easy way to kind of back off things. Listening to how people ask questions, particularly in such an interesting, diverse field with so many different backgrounds, there's different ways people ask questions, and oftentimes those will tell you whether or not your work aligns with them or not, because departmental boundaries, again, are fiction, right? They're useful fiction, but they're fiction nonetheless. And so listening to how people formulate a research question or ask a question about something, about something, that can really tell you how well or not something fits with your work. When you're looking for a mentor, it's hard. People just say, oh, get a mentor, you'll be fine. Like, no, it's really actually hard. There's literature out there, there's suggestions for how to actually ask people these things. The way I like to frame it is that you often need at least two mentors. You need a peer mentor, someone who's sort of at your level that you can have be a witness to your suffering. Like, man, this sucks. Like, pandas, why is it this way? And your buddy's like, I know, right? You know, oh, here's a trick that I learned, or here's a resource that I have, or something like that. And so you have someone who can validate your experiences, provide you support and boosting from that. They can't necessarily give you direction, but they can provide a sort of moral support for you for when you're in these kind of crisis points. Someone who understands the trials you're going through. The other hand, you need to have a senior or experienced mentor. And this could be an upperclassman if you're a freshman. This could be a later year PhD student if you're a master's student or something like that. Someone who's sort of been through the pathway or a similar pathway or seen other people go through it that you're interested in. Someone who gets you and has seen how the pathways work and can help you navigate that. I have a couple people in my life that are like this, and oftentimes those one-liner little remarks from them have been the most impactful in my life, of just, I'm really worried about this, and I'm really struggling to understand what I want out of it and what I should do about it. And they look at me and say their answer in one sentence, and, oh, you're right. You're totally right. And I feel so much more relieved. And that's something a peer can't give me necessarily because they haven't seen it. So you have to have these two different perspectives. Trying to build your own community is hard. Community building is hard. So find an established framework, right? You don't need a data science club to get this job done. There's meetups all over the place. The Carpentries is an organization, it's international, it's formal and informal on a lot of different campuses, including teaching campuses as well, so teaching colleges. there's people all over the place who are affiliated, and we're all about community and mentorship and being welcoming. And I might not understand your research area, but I'm here to listen, right? That's very Carpentries. There's also Mozilla study groups. They have a very nice guide on how to create a little group of your own, kind of get the job done, make a reading group or something like that. If you're in a place to make something your own. There's also grad student groups or reading groups or something like that. Look for stuff that already exists and tap into existing resources, I think, is the biggest suggestion I have, because you don't want to reinvent the wheel. And if there's something that already exists that's more or less what you're after, go there, be there, and let that serve as a starting place. So that's what I have. You guys, questions or whatever?
Thank you, Elizabeth. That was very interesting. I must say for myself and I think for everyone. I appreciated particularly the very interesting approach you took, mentioning stories of the community and the sense of belonging. I think this was a very nice approach that I haven't heard a lot, and that I think makes a lot of sense in a new field like you say, and applies very well to data science and being such an interdisciplinary field. And I took a lot of notes and your advice. I noted learning about these stories of the communities, listen and watch, have maybe a watch list, be okay not to know everything in this field that can be a bit overwhelming sometimes, especially when people come from very different backgrounds, like you mentioned, using the established framework, mentors and senior mentors. So thank you for all these advice. I think those are great advice. I'm going to turn to the audience to know if there are a few questions for now, and we are not so many. I think you can just kick in and ask your question if you'd like.
Sure. It's so I see. Okay, so Lior's put something in chat already. You mentioned the importance of learning how others perform data science. How can you bring it to students in the course, given that the teacher is not others? Lior, anyway, that may be straightforward. Otherwise, Lior, feel free to unmute yourself and clarify or explicate.
So I'll give you a chance to go ahead and take the mic. I think my interpretation of this question, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is sort of, if you're not the teacher, how do you teach other people things? You don't have to be an expert to teach things. In fact, there's a book on how to teach what you don't know. That is amazing, because oftentimes being just one step ahead of your learner is the best place to teach from, because you can really emote with your learner and you're like, I know this makes no sense, right? But like, let me show you the one thing that really made it clear to me, right? Instead of having that incredibly internalized tacit knowledge of stuff, you're still very much grappling with it. You're not going from A to D, you're still passing A to B to C to D. We talk about a lot of this in the Carpentries as well, and so there's actually really explicit advice on how to teach things when you're still actively learning them yourself. Did I hit close to what you're...
Yeah, he
or even
says.
just telling the story of other people as well. Like, here's my interpretation of whatever's going on, something like that.
So I have a question. As you're moving around campuses and different organizations and contexts of training and learning, how do you see the development? So the context for my question has to do with the, as you said, the institutions are trying to develop data science programs and activities, and it's hard to fit it in. Now, some schools have made new departments. Other schools have condensed departments. There's sort of a whole range, you know, different schools are choosing to do one degree over another, or just certificates. So as you've traveled around in the different contexts, doing training, observing learners, how do you, you know, what do you see as, what do you see as the ways that there can be better connections between the community-driven learning activities and some of the formalized development of institutional programming that's happening? Does that have to only be driven by one or two people, or have you seen potential ways that data carpentry's activities can integrate better, for example, with a formal, you know, a formal program?
Man, it's such a good question, and I wish I could answer this really, really well. I think because every institution is responding to their own political and resource pressure,
Yeah.
that you kind of have to go with whoever has the money that supports you and kind of play to their tune. Yeah, if you look at the history of research data management and data curation groups on campuses, it's just sort of taken the flavor of whoever had the funding to throw at them. Yeah, sort of the formalism, formal spaces, how can formal spaces communicate the informal and do that efficiently? I think bringing in stories and bringing in investigative, playful design into your classes, because that is at the heart of data science, right? You just want to play with the data. Look at insights you haven't thought of before. It's not like you're running the same quarterly report on the data. You're trying to combine it with other new things. It's all about novelty, and it's all about play and creativity. And sort of incorporating those into the classroom, and incorporating the narrative frame that there's theory and there's practice, and they go together, right? If you talk about math, right, you're teaching math, right? There's the formalisms, there's the formal structure, the formal theory behind the math, but now here's the performative aspect of the math. And if you look at it, like, you're being tested on the performative aspect of the math because you have to perform it to answer the questions, to do the computations, but that's informed by the formal in there. One of the research things that I want to do is understand better people learning in informal spaces. I think get up to speed faster than those in the formal spaces, because often the formal spaces don't talk about the everyday practices that are the norm for these activities. So I don't know the answer to that question. I think it comes down to maybe classroom design and learning design and incorporating informal work into it and trying to establish that informal community of peers, but it's imperfect science.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. That's great. Very interesting. Thank you.
So while we see if there's any other questions, I have a question to Elizabeth, and I was wondering, from everything you said and your experience, and thinking about what data science student groups can bring to students, what do you think are opportunities for students to self-organize and provide something more when they assemble and bring their strengths together? What do you think those groups bring to students?
They bring energy and a place to belong. And I love working with students who come from totally different backgrounds than mine, because they ask different questions that I would never have thought of before. Because they see the data through the lens of their background. I work with grad students too, so they're all like, I am very good at this one thing, and that thing happens to be in there. Like, we use the text of Dracula for a lot of our assignments, and I've had a couple like Dracula scholars come in from a literature background, and the way I'm talking about the text and I have the homework assignments, they're interpreting that through like the lens of their expertise of the novel, of the book, and it's just fascinating to like interact with them. I love giving people a space to just play their own tune and have a jam. And students just, I think college is so formal and rigid and structured that just having a place of like, I don't know, what do you want to do? And letting people just make it their own is exciting and important way to just really experience the practice of a field.
Yeah.
I hope.
That's right.
The answer. Do you think data science is practical as an undergraduate degree, or should it be limited to graduate studies? I think they're both useful through really different ways. I love the idea of an undergraduate program in data science because everything should be open to you, right? So you should hopefully be getting good statistics and programming and humanities and liberal arts and social science exposure to that, and really having, to me, what college should be, if like every department's on the table, bring it. So no, I think it, now whether or not that diffuses your expertise across so many things that you're not expert enough to go out into the field, that's a reasonable question. I think it's still practical. Like, do what you're passionate about and what grows your mind. I don't think it necessarily, I wouldn't agree that it only belongs in graduate studies. But I think we're still in the beginning of this conversation, and so there's no clear answers to anything in the world.
Any other questions?
I don't have questions. I would love to talk about these things for another 2 hours. I mean, because the questions that we've had, we could talk about for a long time. So, and yes, I mean, we could ask other questions. This is wonderful.
Okay, well then, I think we can thank Elizabeth for your presentation again, this great conversation, and wish you good luck with what your next.
Thank you, and thank you all for your questions too. I don't get to talk about this enough, and I want to be questioned more. This is so good because I don't know the answers and I want to know them. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Elizabeth.